Welcome back, everyone, to this next episode of Beyond the Beeps. This is a day that I have been waiting for a long time. We have an incredibly special guest here with us today, Betsy Pilon. Betsy is the executive director of Hope for HIE, which is the premier organization and global nonprofit patient advocacy and support organization dedicated to improving the quality of life for children and families impacted by neonatal and pediatric acquired hypoxic, ischemic encephalopathy. We will go through what those words mean in a moment. They work through advocacy, awareness, education, research, and support. Hope for HIE connects over 15,000 families, researchers, clinicians, and the greater community worldwide through a comprehensive network. They are incredible, doing incredible things. Betsy herself is a parent of a child who was born with hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, or HIE. And her son received excellent clinical care. When she and her family were there, they received no educational information, support, or information on neonatal HIE. Once she got connected to a very baby organization of Hope for HIE through Facebook, which is when it was a support group there, she worked with the other families to grow this organization into what it is now, 14 years later. She is based out of Detroit, Michigan, and travels the world as an accomplished speaker, writer, advocate, and connector. A connector, that's a great word. You absolutely are, with a background in marketing and corporate communication in healthcare, education, and automotive. She is involved in several neonatal and neurology related work groups, task force, and committees, elevating the lived experiences of the HIE community to be a change agent in patient advocacy and research. And she is here with us. Of course, we always have parents, but she's also an expert in this field, a parent expert, a content expert, and has spoken, in DC on policy, advocating around the world on this. And you may have seen her at the conferences and I and heard her on different podcasts because this is a really important topic and it's something that our families experience in the NICU quite a lot. And thankful for a lot of changes in care and the way care has been provided for families, especially here in South Florida. We are getting incredible outcomes for babies who may not have had those in the past. But that also means we have families who need support to navigate what's going on. So this is an incredibly special conversation here. Welcome, Betsy Pilon.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here with you.
Yeah, and getting her on the schedule, y'all, because she is famous. So we have a big one here today. Big one. Welcome. Um, so tell me a little bit about your experience when you were in the NICU with your baby.
My experience, like many in the HI community, everything for my pregnancy went very well. It was my first pregnancy. I had excellent prenatal care, very comfortable with our care team. And then at 37 weeks, Max stopped moving. And so I had been in clinic a few days prior because my movements had changed. And so we got checked out and sent home because everything looked good on the ultrasound and, everything checked the boxes. And so they had taught me about kick counts. And when I felt things were not right, I called labor and delivery and they said, well, do your kick counts and call us back. And if they're not what they should be, just come in and get checked out. So I did that, and he was not actually moving at all. There were no counts to kick or kicks to count. And so we went into labor and delivery. For whatever reason, we were not super concerned. We thought we were going to be that family that gets checked out and sent home. But instead, whisked to an emergency C-section, and then in our local community hospital. And then the neonatologist that was in the delivery room recommended that Max be transferred down to Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit to receive therapeutic hypothermia, which we had no idea why he would need that or what was going on really. And he was born at like 1 a.m. So it's not super clear. But yeah, we kind of entered the NICU world from there, where he was transferred down. My husband, Mike, followed his ambulance. I had called my parents at 3 a.m. and said, the baby's here and I need you to come be with me while Mike goes with Max. And so my parents came, and then I was able to thankfully be transferred down a couple hours later and have a room down at the hospital to be close by. And yeah, we were entered into the NICU world and did not anticipate, obviously. You hear very much that NICU is synonymous with prematurity. So, I think all of us that kind of go through pregnancies are like, well, we get past a certain point and we think we're good. Um, and yeah, I just had no idea that this could be, something that happens. Um, and so that was kind of the genesis of our NICU stay. We started there. We were in for just about 3 weeks. He went through cooling. He had an MRI, EEG, all the neurodiagnostic testing. Was bolused for an anti-seizure medication because HIE babies are at risk for seizures. It's the leading cause of neonatal seizures. And then, kind of went through the clinical course. He started breathing on his own and was able to eat on his own and all these wonderful things. But the MRI showed some significant damage to his brain. And so, we have kind of this sentinel moment for HIE families deemed MRI day. And so that's really kind of the moment where they look to see, is this something that was transient? Is there another cause? Like HIE is under an umbrella called neonatal encephalopathy, which has many causes. And then it was determined that HIE was the diagnosis. We were not told the diagnosis officially, like in the NICU. We were told that he had a brain injury, and so there wasn't, and then we were told, don't go home and Google, and it's really scary, what you might find on the internet, and it's not necessarily going to be like your child's story or, whatever. But, we were not really given anything else. We were given a brochure for early intervention and a brochure to invite us to apply for the Medicaid supplemental program in our state. And that was it.
Okay. Okay.
And said that, you'll be following up with the pediatrician and then neurology. But we had no, really idea like what we were in store for. And, other than being told he was at risk for developmental delays and cerebral palsy and, and learning and attention issues perhaps later in life. But we had this newborn baby that was our first, and we're what do we do now? And so our questions really focus before we discharge on, is there anyone that you can connect us to? Is there support for this? Is there educational information that you can hand us? I had worked for the health system in a non-clinical role in the marketing and communication department, and I had helped write patient education materials for different service lines within the health system. So the fact that there was not anything for this was really disappointing. We received excellent clinical care. Like the clinical team, incredible. We still talk to some of his nurses today, 14 years later. But that was a real gap. And so, of course, went home, Googled, and found Hope for HIE, the Facebook group, and blogs of 3 different parents that were blogging about their HIE experience. And what was really helpful for me is it was across a spectrum of outcomes, which HIE falls under. And so I wanted to see families living with HIE across the spectrum. I wanted to see what we might be facing and what life looked like, because it was so ambiguous of this, kind of wait and see how things will go. And he's at risk for this, and we'll watch him. And if he needs therapy, we'll get him into therapy. So yeah, so that was really kind of the genesis of the need of seeing the gaps that existed at that time for families, and experiencing that firsthand, experiencing that as someone that, kind of thought that there was going to be more information for families out there for this diagnosis. Come to find out it's not all that rare. And just, have been on a journey, really a learning journey for the past 14 years in so many ways. And working with so many wonderful people to help build Hope for HI, the organization.
Yeah, learning and creation. I mean, it's a birthing of a new support, education, research, so many things that you all have been really at the genesis of and pushing along. And so, I mean, I see it. We've been in the NICUs in South Florida for 11 years, and it has changed, right? Like
Hmm.
it's improved, it's changed. Everything has been pushing along. And for the NICU, which the folks at the incubator talk about, we haven't had too many new new inventions, and that's what they're sort of pushing for. But this is something that has been growing and changing and improving every year, if not every month. So, brava to you all, and thank you so much because it makes a big difference for our families. Um, I'm wondering, I wanted to go back to your pregnancy. There's two things that you mentioned, which I think are really important that I heard was you counted the kicks. I sit on the Fetal Infant Mortality Review Committee for Miami-Dade County. We talk about this forever. I'm really impressed to hear that you talked about that the kicks changed, the quality changed, something was different. Not was the baby moving in this sort of, you know, amorphous language. Um, I'm wondering, what was it inside you that said something was different?
Yeah, so I think there were a couple of different things. One, my belly felt different. So Max had been, active babies, there's like a tension on your stomach. And mine felt very flaccid. So it just I was like, this doesn't feel right. This is weird. And I will say the week before he stopped moving completely, like, and I felt the movement change, but so had called to get in. And they said, well, sometimes movements can change, like as they're running out of room and things like that. And come to find out, like, they're like, especially Count the Kicks, which is a wonderful organization. That's like a misnomer, is like babies don't run out of room. You should still have like understand and learn your baby's patterns, and then that shifts. So I mean, I did what I think
Incredible.
the
We
cure
don't hear
is.
this very
Yeah,
much. I
exactly.
mean, amazing.
Yeah, like
You said
you
something's
call.
different. You did the
Yeah,
right thing.
exactly.
It's
And they
outstanding.
taught me over the phone, like, this is how you do kick counts, drink some orange juice, whatever, and everything checked out, and they're like, "We'll get you in the clinic," and so, yeah, I got checked out, had a, biophysical profile and the non-stress, like, all the things, it was great. And then it wasn't. So I think, just knowing your body, listening, and don't be afraid to elevate, that's my biggest, like, advocacy message of that,
Yeah,
always is, like, you know, don't be afraid to go in to live. Don't feel silly to do it. That they're your resource, and they're your, I remember our labor and delivery said, we're your emergency room. If you need to get checked out, come in. It's not a big deal. And I think having that fear that you're going to be burdening someone to get checked out, because often, I mean, and healthcare right now is really tough to work in, and people are just asked to do more with less always. And so I think we just sometimes as patients feel like we don't want to burden people. But I think that's where we find our advocacy voice too, of like, I just want to get, like, I need reassurance so my baby's health is, okay, and my health is okay. And I think that's, we just all have to do more of that.
yeah, absolutely. Trusting ourselves as mothers and having a partner. Oftentimes we'll hear it's the partner who says, no, we're not waiting. We're going in. And we need those partners to reassure us to trust ourselves sometimes because the world has kind of taught us not to do that. We're trying to unlearn that now and teach our next generations to really trust. I really, really appreciate this because it is something that we do all the time is, this is an emergency. If your baby's different, like take it in and let them tell you it's okay. So wonderful. Okay. So let's go. You gave us a wonderful story, and I sort of want to break it down for our folks who are out there listening, for our providers who are just, the actual caregivers, and then for our parents. The first moments of birth, especially when we're not feeling a baby moving or we're getting some non-reassuring fetal heart rates, and um, it's a little chaotic and often chaotic in this case. Um, What do you think in those moments, our providers can be offering to our families?
Yeah, I mean, I think in those moments when they're literally, it's been identified that these I mean, my situation, there's many causes of HIE. So I just want to preface that, and so for our situation where we went in and there was noted fetal distress and enough that they said we need to get him out. They move very quickly. And I was lucky that I didn't have to be put under general anesthesia. A lot of moms do and miss the birth of their baby, which is really traumatic and awful. They had to place the catheter, they had to do like all the things to prep. The anesthesiologist comes out and gives you like the rundown of like the risk factors if you have to be intubated and like, of like chipping your teeth out and, just all the things. All of that actually caused me to have a bit of a panic attack, which actually was beneficial because it got Max moving. So that shot of adrenaline was really good. And the team actually took a pause and they said, we don't think we have to put her under general because he's now moving and his heart rate variability is moving. And so I was actually able to, it's still an emergency C-section, but I was able to be conscious for it, which was really great. And the anesthesiologist, I swear, the unsung hero of the emergency C-section delivery room, that guy in 1 a.m., is like next to my ear. And he's, as I'm having a panic attack, he's like the calmest. I'm so, I didn't mean to like get you there, but this is a good thing. And we're going to get him out. And, just like really, really calming and reassuring because honestly, the labor and delivery nurse team and everyone that was prepping me, like they don't have time. Like, so I think, in the moment, like there's a lot of really great language that can be used. We're doing this for your health, for your baby's health. Like, we're doing everything to get this baby out as safe and healthy as we can. But you don't know until the baby comes out too, like how they are doing. So, so yeah. So when Max was finally delivered, which was again very short to get them out, he did give out a little cry, which I think was reassuring to us. Um, and the neonatologist knew that he was going to need, support right away. So they like got him, intubated him. Like he wasn't pre-breathing. Like they want the diaphragm to be moving or whatever, like, before. And he wasn't doing that. So they, I think, knew that he was going to need to be intubated. And I
Had
think
they
they were
told you
surprised.
that, Betsy?
Um, I think they did. It's hard to remember in the
It's
moment,
okay, yeah.
like, and
Yeah,
especially 14 years later,
of course.
like what exactly
Well, yeah, because
was said.
I'm sort of
Um,
wondering, like, the
yeah,
thing that I heard you say was so helpful was this anesthesiologist calm and kind of narrating. It is really
yeah,
helpful, especially when things are now being done to you.
yeah,
Even when we're pushing a baby out, a lot is being done without our like, it's wild. So never mind a C-section when everything is being done to you.
yeah.
Having someone sit there and say, "Okay, this is what we're doing, and it's okay, and this is how this works." It helps to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. So I'm wondering also when they saw I'm sure they did a biophysical profile too when you came in and they were like, "Listen, this is not what's happening." Do you recall if they mentioned anything like that? Like, "We're gonna take a look," or they sort of let it be?
I mean, we got in and got monitoring and they said, they did the biophysical profile and then, pretty quickly said, the key words that they used, he was not his heart rate didn't have variability. It was steady at like I think 120. So I mean, it wasn't like he wasn't, like, in the 40s or whatever, like, but he was not there was no variability, and they said he wasn't pre-breathing, so those were the key words that they used, and I was like, "Oh, okay," and they said, "So he's in distress, and he needs to get out, and we need to do a C-section for that." For my own journey, I was actually, kind of panicked at the idea of a C-section, like, oh, we or not even a C-section, actually, I think it was just giving birth in general, like, 2 weeks prior. I remember calling a cousin, um, and she's like, talking me through all these things, and then I was like, "Oh, I don't have to worry about labor, like, here I am," like, what a weird thing to not wish for, but, here I am. So you just never know, like, how, things are gonna go, and in that moment, certainly it was I had great trust in our team, that they were doing what was gonna be the best to, get Max out
Yeah, and care for him.
and care for him, exactly.
Yeah. Did they bring him to your face or chest at all, or he had to go straight away?
No, no, he had to go straight to get intubated,
Okay.
and I like, as a parent, I'm like, "Do what you gotta do to,
Yeah.
like, to get him good." I'm fine. They, like, the OB, continued, like, obviously closing me up and all the things, and my husband was there, and, there wasn't, like a lot of people talk about, like, seeing faces of extreme panic. There really wasn't, like I didn't get that sense that people
Mhm.
were, If they were it was like ducks underwater. Like, they did not I mean, they seemed concerned, but it wasn't like, you know, I've heard of people, like, in the delivery room, these nurses crying and, like, a lot of trauma from everyone in the room, and
Wow.
that wasn't the case for me, so I think that probably is why our approach was much more like, "Oh, they've got him, we've got
Yeah.
this, like, whatever he needs," I had no idea that, like, being transferred was such a was such a big deal. I had no idea about NICU levels or anything, like,
Yeah.
before that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important is what the room feels like, again, because when everything's being done to you, you're observing all of it. So you
Yeah.
took in the people moving and though it was kind of entropy, organized chaos, right? Everybody had it under control, and I think that's very important for a family to feel, right?
Yeah, and we
Is
didn't feel like we were left without communication, I mean, I think everyone was narrating, like, "This is what's happening next. We're now gonna take him to be evaluated. We're gonna, like, place this probe to see, like, what's going on, and then we'll be back to let you know how he's doing and what we would suggest is the plan of care." I mean, it was very, like they were phenomenal.
That's
And
wonderful.
then for my post recovery, like, the OB was so kind and so I mean, it definitely freaked her out. Like, I've seen her since then and we've talked, but, it's and I have a great story for that later on if we wanna talk about that.
For sure. Of course. So those are like those sort of first days, first moments really. And now the other great thing that I heard is that they transferred you along
Yeah.
shortly after.
Oh,
That
yeah.
doesn't happen
No, I
very
was
much.
very, very lucky for that, and truly, I think part of that was because I was flagged in the system as an employee, and I had changed jobs, like, I think a year prior or something, so I was no longer working for the health system, but I think I was still flagged, and so I do think that made a difference. They had beds down, down in the maternity ward, down at, Henry Ford Hospital. I got a private room, which was really nice,
Yes.
and, it was the proximity was very close. I don't know if they were if the a lot of that was due to also they were afraid that he was not going to live, because, as he transferred down, and they were getting him into cooling, like, things went really bad, and they were afraid that they were losing him, in those moments. So I don't know if that was, like the severity was much greater than, the ducks in
Yeah,
the
the little
delivery
pedaling
room.
ducks. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, let
Yeah.
on.
Well, either way, that is the best thing that could be done for your family is to keep you together. Um for to maximize outcomes, whatever those might be, right? If it, you know, I'm just really impressed. It's really courageous and compassionate and best practice for them to have done that. So that's makes me happy
Yeah,
because
we
it
we
doesn't
got
happen all the time.
very, very lucky. I mean, even the neonatologist who was in the delivery room, I mean, poor guy, he was on service in the NICU for the next 5 days, and he
Oh,
was our yeah, I know, like,
it's a lot of days.
it's a lot of days, but he was phenomenal and I mean, that continuity of care, like, to have the same neonatologist was unheard of, like, it was absolutely phenomenal, and I will, never forget, like, just the care that he brought to the bedside every single day for us as a family.
Yeah. So, Max needed cooling, and so that's you all break down in the initial phase, the therapeutic window, and the secondary phase of HIE. So, in that initial phase, where is the birth, the assessments, the evaluations, and then sounds like he went pretty quickly, which I know because the window is not terribly long,
Yeah.
and they were assessing him to decide, okay, what do we need to do to care for him? And Max required cooling. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that conversation? How was that presented to you and what we
Yeah.
know about it now for sure?
So in 2012, I think it's really interesting to talk about this point in time in science and care for HIE. 2012 was really this moment where cooling was going from clinical trials and getting good data on safety and efficacy into best practice. And so it was kind of this moment in time where some kids weren't getting cooled, so, who needed to be, I think being in Detroit in the proximity to Sita Shankaran and her, she's the PI on the multi-center trials for HIE. And the month after Max got home from the NICU, the long-term data published, about therapeutic hypothermia. So I think we were very lucky in having access, and a team that was very familiar with the research that was going on. And so the neonatologist, when they had done their assessment and he came in to talk to us about next steps, said, we have done these assessments. We think Max is an excellent candidate for this therapy, but it requires a transfer downtown because that's where the therapy is. And he explained like we cool down the body for 3 days. It slows everything down to let him heal. And then, after that, it's a warm up. And then we do, some different things. And I don't even think they mentioned that they do an MRI, like in that consenting moment. Uh, and so he said, we just need to, sign the consent forms to, send him down. And we're like, oh, of course. Like, again, implicit trust, like do what you got to do. And so, it was just, a lot of it, I think coping, for my husband and I is like just going with the flow during, trauma and crisis and just like, what do we do? How do we talk to people to try to find out more information? But the information I feel like was presented very well to us, that it was understandable and that, we were like, of course you say he needs this, then let's do it. So yeah.
Yeah. So I still, I was, when you told me your story, I was flooded back to the first time I was treating, I'm a pediatric physical therapist by career and degree prior to doing all of these things. And I remember my first patient who had received therapeutic cooling. And was it possible to have been in 2010?
Yeah,
Maybe. Yeah,
absolutely. Mhm.
2009 or 2010, and I was like, "What is this?" Like, "This is incredible." He's a little, little baby with his little APGAR score, so those of you who have had a baby, they look at your baby, how they respond to life, of zeros, 0, 0, 0. So they did the cooling I'm sorry, 002 or something like
Right.
that, and, um, and it was amazing, and having grown up in New England and knowing about folks who fell through the ice and how
Mhm.
that came to be, I wrapped my head around it and I was like, "This is extraordinary." And then, of course, to see this little boy who was looking pretty darn normal, uh,
Mhm.
after not being alive,
Yeah.
was really an incredible experience to see that back then and now
Yeah,
how it's
it sounds like
evolved.
science fiction, right? Like, it
Yeah,
sounds "You're
yeah.
gonna do what? You're gonna cool my baby down for 3 days?" Like, okay, that's it sounds like science fiction for sure, but it's amazing.
Yeah, it truly is, and knowing that they sort of have to pause all of the secondary effects of this, and that we can do that is incredible. Um, let's stay in that therapeutic window, the treatments, because you do a lot of work in advocacy, and you had mentioned when we spoke earlier about different protocols and treatments. Um, one thing that happens in cooling, right, is we can't touch the baby. That's the standard currently in the hospitals I'm in. So hopefully you'll update that for us. Um, but then I also hear about things like a therapeutic cooling blanket to allow kangaroo care. And can we do that? What's the gold standard right now in where you see for this cooling treatment?
Yeah, so I think, cooling for a long time, and in particular, our experience, you're told, like, "Do not touch Max, do not, like, breathe near him." Like,
Right.
it's very much like, "Do not overstimulate this baby. He's very, this can cause him to have all sorts of additional issues." They're like, "Oh, of course, like, we're not gonna touch him. That's fine. We're over here. We'll be able to touch him when we can." But that's also separation is so traumatic and it's like totally antithetical to parenting and to that, I mean, just biological process of,
Hmm.
that bonding that you need for
Right.
physiological benefits, not just like, it feels great and the dopamine and serotonin, all the boosters that go to make everyone happy with a new baby. But that's physiologically imperative for, the baby and, parents to do
Yes.
this. And so I think because it's like they're so worried, the clinical team obviously with all of this new advancement that cooling is or was, And and babies are so fragile, and
Right.
they just like, it's like, let's just not touch it. We're gonna just do this and be okay.
Right.
But obviously, from the parenting perspective, and again, biological, physiological, perspective, like that's not great, as we know. Like in the
Yeah.
preemie side, like how quickly can you hold? How, much can you kangaroo? Like all as often and possible. And so over the years, we've had some wonderful researchers who have worked with families, because family is always, like the call is like, it's so traumatic to not be able to hold your baby for several days while they're on this cooling blanket. And how do you make that feasible? Right. And so with all the things that cooling needs to be, to the consistency that you need to keep temperature, and, and not, jostling the baby around too
Right.
much and whatnot. But also those babies need developmental care during, just like any other baby, right? And so as a PT and, and OTs out there, they often don't get to these babies until they're out of cooling. And there's so many that are like, I want to get my hands on those babies earlier, because we can start doing things that can improve outcomes. Like if we're,
Right.
5, 7 days of not being able to hold, touch, work on, suck, swallow, get, like all the things. There's so many layers to it. So over the years, there's been some excellent researchers. Dr. Alexa Craig is one out of Maine Medical. Dr. Ela Shakarapani, who's in the UK. They both have done a lot of work in holding during cooling.
Hmm.
And the UK has called it cool cuddles. And then we brought in a lot of this information in conjunction with the Newborn Brain Society and kicked off Polar Bear Care this year during HI Awareness Month in April, really to foster the ability for more units to feel comfortable holding during cooling. And holding is not like skin to skin. That is just not
Right.
feasible.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you can't, that temperature management.
Temperature
But
wouldn't
what you
happen.
can
Yeah.
do, there's all sorts of developmental care. And like these cooling blankets are getting better and better. My plea always to the manufacturers is you need to work with families to build a better product that is family centered, that, has the temperature regulation and management that it needs, that makes things less bulky for everyone to be nervous about lines everywhere and whatnot. And so what's been really fun through Polar Bear Care and the hold-a-thon that we did in April is seeing the resources come together. We built polarbearcare.org.
Yeah.
There's sample protocols, there's nursing videos, there's like facilitation videos, tips, tricks, hacks to make it feasible and safe, especially, nurses worry about umbilical lines.
Yeah.
And just all sorts of things, during cooling. And some, there's units that have holding guidelines for all babies, and they include HIE babies in that. And so they're able to foster these because they do, we do find it can lower length of stay. It, improves bonding, like decreases trauma. So it's family centered trauma informed care that is combined in this effort. Not every baby will be eligible, but there are exclusion and inclusion criteria for all of these sample protocols. And at the end of the day, families that are able to hold their babies in any form or fashion, even if it's
Yep.
through a cooling blanket in their lap,
Yes. Hmm.
uh, that trauma is decreased. They
Absolutely.
overwhelmingly, I have not heard from a parent saying, that was the worst. I shouldn't have done that. Like it's,
Right. Yeah.
it's all very positive. It's all, the only thing is like the people that can't or haven't been able to, they're like, "Oh, this is so amazing that these families are able to do it." It's a bittersweet thing for families that have been through it of like, I wish I had that for me. But I feel like with all of us, why we're in advocacy and support and all of this is to make it better for the next parents. So, this is a new generation of
Hmm.
care.
Hmm.
Um, the intensive care for management of these babies without holding has gotten significantly better. I mean, over the past decade plus. So there's so many improvements that are going on in just the general medical care of these babies, let alone interventions like cooling and other things that are, hopefully on the horizon.
Yeah. I'm wondering, the way you tell your story now, is with such balance. So that's not to say you felt that internally. You may have projected that externally back then. Um, but I'm wondering if they had come to you then, because you said, whatever you need to do, do it. If they had come to you and said, we have, this is the protocol as it's been done, but we're going to try this. We're not try. We also are doing this approach where you're going to be able to hold him. Had Max qualified, right? And I don't know whether he would have, but let's say he did, and they said he qualifies for you to be able to hold him. What do you think? And obviously, it's hard to know when you're not in it, but what do you think you would have thought at that point?
Oh, I would have been elated if they said that they felt it was safe and that they would be right there if, which is what happens, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Like when these holds are facilitated. I mean, I would have, yeah, we would have loved that. Like
Yeah.
as soon as we could hold him, we did not stop, like,
Yeah.
and like we kangaroo carried that kid. We were at bedside, even like, during cooling, we're at bedside as often as we could possibly be. I was obviously still healing from my C-section, but as soon as I could get there, we were at bedside. We were, I mean, the NICU setup was in pods, so there wasn't like a ton of room, to have like two parents at the bedside all the time. But we definitely shoe pegged ourselves or
Got
shoehorned
yourselves those
ourselves
chairs.
into that. Yeah, exactly. I feel like we're a baby.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and then Max in particular, like he was very scary, when we got to the hospital in the first like 12, 24 hours. But afterwards, like he was able to be extubated during cooling. So he made a
Wow.
very good turnaround. And so from that point, it was like that I think was when we were like, okay, can I hold him yet? Like when do I get to hold like he is
Yeah.
off,
Yeah.
he's extubated, he's on a nasal cannula, like
Yeah.
and we'd ask, like, when can we hold him? And they're like, well, we're going to do the MRI. And when the umbilical line comes out and, whatever, like, and
Right.
then,
Yeah, that
so,
umbilical line is the
but
holdout for a
like,
lot of things.
yeah, yeah. And I think, when you have more education and practice than from the nursing side, for what I've learned from so many of these wonderful nurses that are pushing this initiative forward is, it just takes practice and confidence to get it right. And there's, like I said, so I watched these training videos. I was so impressed with how they manage their lines and the thought that goes into all these different, systems to make it feasible. So yes, if that was in an option, I would absolutely, I would have done it in a heartbeat
Yeah.
for sure.
So for polar bear care, is there a sim lab anywhere in the US for, I mean, now,
I
or
don't
videos are
think so.
sufficient, you think?
Yeah, I think the videos, I think there's definitely practice that happens. Like I said, the nurse that her name is Lisa Carruthers. She's from McGill University
Mhm.
in Ontario, and they definitely practice with dolls. Before
Yeah.
doing it, like you can
Yeah.
see some of the pictures and things like that. So I think yeah, sim education can certainly be helpful to practice moving the lines and taping them down and what that looks like and what it's like takes two nurses to
Right. Yeah.
facilitate and
But
but
that's
yeah
standard, right? So
yeah,
that is not new for the NICU, right? So
correct.
we have
Yeah.
to do that for any baby who's
Yeah.
intubated or on even a CPAP or even
Mhm.
NIPPV, anything where we have any extra lines, which are almost all of our babies.
Yeah.
So doing a
Yeah.
facilitated transfer with multiple team members, that is standard. And or it should be. Everyone should be comfortable with that. You get your little partner, you get your respiratory therapist, if that's who you need or whoever it might be, and make the transfer. Make the transfer. It's possible. How long? So for polar bear care, what is the like kangaroo has its rules, or not rules, but like guidelines. What is the holding time for polar bear care?
Gosh, I would need to look that up.
That's
So
okay.
I
No, I
think
just was wondering, is it
I
something
think
that they
it
do it
varies.
temporary, like a brief
Yeah.
period, or is it something where once you're in that position, they stay for a couple hours?
I think it's for, from what I understand, it's probably like an hour is, they want to see how long they can facilitate that. But obviously at some point, like if mom or dad has to like
Yeah, of course.
nip and use the
Yeah.
bathroom or, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, of
there's like,
course.
again, and the protocol that is shared, it's like, ask the parent to go to the bathroom first and make sure they're comfortable. And, like these are some, some different things to think about.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
I
sense.
think as long as the
Again,
baby
same thing.
is tolerating, like then I
You
don't
stick
think there's a
around.
limit. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so we made it through our therapeutic window, which still, for those of you who are out there, this is only the first couple of days, right? And now
Mhm.
we continue on into the secondary phase. So we made it through. Max made it through. He was incredibly extubated while being cooled, which is
Mhm.
outstanding to hear. They did, EEGs with him, correct?
Yep. So he
You know,
didn't have continuous EEG, which is a different standard now. So,
okay.
continuous EEG is really recommended. The ACNS guidelines for continuous EEG monitoring during therapeutic hypothermia were completed and are now, working to be implemented. So Max had like AEEG. He had it for the first, I think, 12 hours of life, but it was not continuous. And
Mhm.
then he had an EEG after cooling, and then I think he might have had a third one, just but short term. It wasn't anything like, again, continuous. So when we talk about like seizures and things like that, like we don't know if he had subclinical seizures, outside of that. He didn't have any in the 12 hours that he had an EEG on, but we don't know if he had them of any other time. And that's why the guidelines are new and why they're important is there are some kids, especially we call them the maybe babies. So those so cooling has to be initiated within the first 6 hours of birth. And so AEG doesn't necessarily pick up on all of the potential subclinical seizures that a baby might be having. And so when you're looking at, is there a baby that's like, should they be cooled? They almost meet the criteria. What we're finding in a lot of these QI improvements and some of the clinical trials and research studies that are going on now is that they're definitely babies when you put CEG on them, continuous EEG, that they are having subclinical seizures and they would not be considered a mild HIE. They'd be in that more moderate to severe and qualify for cooling. So missing cooling for families is really heartbreaking if they,
Yeah.
like it's the one therapeutic intervention that we have right now for HIE. And then, like that's missed outcomes, I mean, so many things. So this is really a care improvement project. I'm very, very eager to see how many there's the Cool Prime study right now that's going on for mild HIE. Part of the protocol is to do this EEG on the babies, earlier to screen. And I'm so curious to see what that data is going to look like because anecdotally, it has been shared, how many babies screen out of the mild HIE and are
Mhm.
actually moderate when they screen them because they're having those subclinical seizures. So it's if you think about like how many babies could we be missing
Right.
out there that are actually not mild. And so, it's just we're getting better with care and it takes time to implement these guideline changes and
Sure.
but it's really amazing to see and 10 years is a really short time to have these changes
Yeah.
happen, 14 years, and so and we're there's it's like really going up in so many ways of accelerating care and therapeutic options for HIE.
Yeah, for sure, and like I said, even in this 10 year 11 years that we've been doing this, even and in I feel even a sharp increase in, I would say, the last 5 years,
Mhm, yes.
more like, even more, and obviously, that's with guidelines and things coming online. And in case we didn't make it clear, EEG is when they put the little cap on the baby's head with the little monitors, and they're looking for any abnormal neurologic activity or seizures. In case somebody's like, "What are they saying?" That's what EEG is. Um, okay, so in that, now we're sort of right, but looking more like a typical baby, and I'm putting that in air quotes, or a normal baby, where we're off of cooling and we're starting to, initiate feeds and do typical baby stuff, right? And now we're watching our babies. And I wonder, the uncertainty of having a baby is a lot, right? And like you said, when you make it full term, you let go of a lot of us as parents say, okay, have made it. We try to rest our nervous system a little bit. And then when we have something like this happen, our nervous system remembers all of that fear and then adds to it and gets that uncertainty really, really going. Um, in that period after we've had this traumatic experience, whether or not we feel traumatized by it is a different story, how we were handled. Um, Now where it's a new uncertainty of watching and waiting. What was that period like for you?
Yeah, so, I think with the HIE experience, you go through cooling, they cool down, warm up, and then, MRI day comes along and everyone's watching and waiting. What is the MRI going to say? It's like, just like wait and see for cooling to be done, wait and see to get the MRI, waiting to see if he's going to feed okay, like all this stuff, we talk about the wait and see so much. And yeah, it's I think, there's different people cope in different ways. And so, for us, I think we were just like, we're just going to take it moment by moment and try
Mhm.
not to get ahead of ourselves. I mean, MRI day is tough because like, you talk about prognosis. That's like when they're like putting all these pieces together. His EEG says this, his MRI says this, his clinical picture says this. And this is what we know from the current data out there and, and whatnot. And so, it's really kind of like they're trying to give you this crystal ball that isn't great either, like especially for kids that are in this like in between realm where, Max started feeding slowly, but feeding and then working up after his MRI. It was safe to feed him. He was, on room on a nasal cannula for another like week plus after cooling. Um, and so it's just kind of like you go through and you talk about these targets that they want to hit for feeding, and I mean, the feeding stuff was really really stressful. Like I think you hear that a lot from NICU families all over and whatever regard that they're in there for. But there's a lot of pressure of like, well, if he doesn't hit these, then we're going to give him an NG tube, and I was like, oh, that feels like a failure, like.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
the pressure of like, we're going to send the lactation consultant around, and you're going to work on this, and it just was, like, so much pressure after going through, like, is my baby going to live or die, to, I can't touch him and hold him and he's cold, to and on morphine and all these things, to an MRI that's catastrophic,
Yeah.
that they're telling us, like, he has damage everywhere and, and could have all of these, things in life, and then now we're trying to feed this baby who has not had, any sort of SLP
Yeah, no,
intervention
like you mentioned
because
before, none of the developmental things at
yeah,
the right times.
exactly. So there's just a lot of pressure. And so for me, I think, I was pumping and things like that. And I was like, okay, well, that's something I can do and did diligently and whatever. And if this breastfeeding thing isn't going to work out, I don't care. I just want my baby fed. I do not care at all. And that was like, I think a lot of people express like interactions that don't feel good with lactation consultants because we've gone so far over to like breast is best and whatever and breast milk. And it's great and it's wonderful. And parent mental health is equally important. Like we have to go
Yeah.
home and take care of this baby and like it's a lot. So I didn't like feeling like there was a threat that the if he didn't get enough of whatever, that it was a failure and that he would have to like gavage the rest. Or I hated the word
Right.
gavage, like still to this
Mm,
day I just
it's
can't stand it.
triggering. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it's just a gross word, and it's like it's not even, like it's so ultra clinical, like it's
Yeah.
just I don't know. So we avoided it, and that was a win. And he eventually, got improved sexual gag and took was taking full feeds and went home and all the things. But it's in that in between period, and then I remember, like, we got moved to the step down unit, which is a big victory, um, and it was this open bay with, like, 10 different beds or 12 different beds or whatever, and half of them were full, and then there's babies that are by themselves because for whatever reason, parents can't be at the bedside. You have a couple parents that are every day, all day. My husband had to go back to work, and I'm just sitting there alone, and I just, like we had rounds and I just like started bawling. And like this nurse came up and she's like, "What are you so upset about? He's doing well." And it was like, I'm like, I have just been through, 2 weeks of hell. And then my husband is not here. I am by myself. Like, there's again, no support. Like, we weren't in a children's hospital that has like some, embedded support and things like that. And again, the clinical care was excellent. Like they took a great care of Max. So I don't want to, like ever
Yeah.
disparage that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was extremely isolating. We were the only full term baby that was in that, like ultra, they said the sickest pod. I can't believe that doesn't feel
Oh
good.
boy.
Yeah.
I have
So like
lots
all
to
the
say
things.
about that word.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so, it's like you go through it and then it's like, well, is he ever gonna get to go home? This feels like it's dragging on, even though it had
Mhm.
only been they're like, well, this is a really short stay right now compared to others. And I understand that, but every day feels like a week in the NICU.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter, how long you're in there. Um, it's not a place anyone wants to be.
That's right.
So
That's right. It breaks my heart. It brings tears to my eyes. It's something, um, it breaks my heart when our caregivers get crispy like that.
Mhm.
It's, that they've been burned out to the point that they can't see the
Yeah.
humanity in each family and the journey, and it's something I know we work on really diligently, um but it's a systemic failure, and we're failing our families, and we're failing our nurses and care providers, that the only way for them to cope is to compartmentalize like this and pass that on to a family. So I'm so sorry that that person said that to you.
Oh, it's 14 years I've been in therapy, it's great. Like,
But
it's
that's the difference
that's
between going through
yeah,
trauma and having your trauma traumatize you,
yeah, absolutely,
right?
yeah.
That instead of somebody just sitting with you,
Mhm.
wrapping you up in their arms and saying, "Tell me about it,"
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, well, that's why psychosocial support for families, like, is an imperative,
It's an imperative.
it's not optional. Like, this
No.
is I mean, seeing what is done now in so many places is so amazing. I mean, whether it's peer support or NICU psychologists that are
Mhm.
now embedded. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many great programs that are doing exceptional work to prevent that re-traumatization. Like,
Yeah.
and that's something that I know all of us in this, advocacy and support realm are so committed to in so many different ways. And our clinical partners that are
Yes.
driving it forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. So many great ones, you're right. So, when did the language HIE get given to you? At what point in this, early birth, cooling, treatment phase, and then post-treatment, wait and see, when did that get presented to you, if ever?
Yeah. So, so I told you the first week was excellent. We had family-centered rounds, the neonatologist was excellent. The next week went pretty well. Max was there for all just under 3 weeks, and it was like the 3rd week we were there, and this neonatologist did not like to talk to parents. You could tell. And this was after we were in the step down unit, and they did rounds. You could hear like everything about everyone's baby, whatever. Not ideal. And so I hear them talking about Max. Again, my husband, this might have been like the gavage day too. I don't know. It's all all not great. It was the same, I will tell you, it's the same nurse practitioner that made the gavage comment that was in this rounds. And so they're talking and I hear him say the word encephalopathy. And I'm like, we've been here for a minute and I have not heard this word used. We've seen the neurologist, we've seen like, talked to a lot of people. And so I flagged them down because they weren't even gonna like stop by. And again, I remember sitting there, there's like not a lot, there's like maybe 3 other families and a 12, there's not a lot of us that were hanging out there. Um, and like, "Can I ask you a question?" And he just, like, seemed really annoyed that I had to ask. And so I said, "I heard you say the word encephalopathy. Is that his diagnosis? Is that like, that seems important. That's a big medical word." And he's like, "Yeah, it just means it has to do with something in the brain, and don't go home and Google it." And then he walked off. And I was like, "Oh." Then I was like, "Okay, well, this seems important." Now I have a sister-in-law who is a pediatric physical therapist, and so I immediately text her and I said, "Sarah, what does encephalopathy mean? I just heard this term." And I said I got kind of brushed off, and she's like, "We will talk about this when I have more, a minute to talk through." So that was the
Yeah.
first time,
I'm gonna
and
hop on an
then
airplane, Imma sit by your side to tell you
yeah,
about that.
I mean, and like, and don't go home and Google it. I was like, "What?" Like, what do you want me to do with that? So, and I
Yeah.
will say it's very interesting, like, one of my best friends, like, she had Googled cooling, so she knew, like, she had seen the terms HIE, but she didn't wanna, I mean, it's kind of an awkward thing of like, "Hey, do you know your baby might have HIE?"
Yeah.
And so, uh, we waited to ask until, because I just feel like we wanted to at that point, because it was just a couple days before we got discharged, we just wanted to get out of there. I was like, I just wanna
Yep.
go." Like,
Yep.
I'll look at this up later, and sure enough, looked it up, and I was like, "Oh, this makes sense." And then my best friend was like, "Yes, I knew that the first day because I, was digging into what was going on." And then, when we had our first follow-up with the neurologist, I said, "Is this HIE?" And he said, "Yes." And I was like, "Okay, now you need to explain all this to me." And by that
Right.
time, I had already connected him with Hope for HIE, so I felt like, it felt distrustful a little bit, even though there was nothing that was, like, preventable in my case. There was no, like, any sort of, like I said, any sort of question about the quality of care that he received. But the fact that, like, I mean, I equate it to, you go to the doctor, they tell you you have a tumor, and then they say, "Don't go home and Google it." Like, is it cancerous? Is it
Yeah,
benign? What's the treatment plan? What are we doing
yeah,
here, you know?
yeah,
And, like, it's your baby's brain. Like, this is the hub
big
of who
deal.
they are.
Yeah.
So to not have any sort of education, to not name it, to not talk about it, and so that's been something I ask a lot and have been over the past 14 years of a lot of the physicians we work with, a lot of the conversations we have, in advocacy of, like, when do you they're like, "Oh, we call it neonatal encephalopathy often, the umbrella diagnosis." I'm like, "Well, when do you have an idea that it's not metabolic, genetic, except where you're really, using like, whatever, just use the term, like, you can qualify it however you want. Is it probable? Is it likely? Is it, I don't care, but families need to know what a diagnostic you wouldn't do that in any other area of medicine. Not a single one would you be so vague with someone. So, to me, that was very unacceptable, continues to be. I mean, it's gotten a lot better over the past, obviously, when you have an organization called Hope for HIE and you have resources that people refer to, the recognition, the naming gets better and stronger as you build and people, get into the fold and you're working with people that are professionals and the experts and the leaders and, research and care in HIE. But it still happens. We still have families every week say, I found it in my medical records. It's painful. It's so preventable too. It's like not HIE. HIE can be preventable in some cases, but the majority are not. Um, but the trauma, the extra trauma that you're adding to a family is absolutely preventable.
Yeah, um you all had a post on your Instagram recently that was comparing 2 families in 2 hospitals that had your resources. So it had Hope for HIE resources, which, by the way, for those of you who are out there, get the resources for your hospital. They're wonderful. They are loving. They are helpful. It's not, scary. It's not, it's a loving little bag. There's a bunch of different levels. Betsy should be telling you this, not me, but I love them because it gives folks a little guideline, things to the language to be asking about in the event that the providers don't bring it to you. Um, you as a parent can say, "Is this?" Right? Ideally, the providers are sort of leading the communication, but parents are the head of the NICU, the parent team, right? So you can ask those questions and bring it to fruition. But anyway, in this Instagram post, it was 2 families, one where they had resources available. One was given them and the other one wasn't, and their experience was completely different. And almost the same day, or no, it was a different time, but we had a family that, clearly was in the record as HIE. And so as the family's getting ready to go, I said, okay, so the day, how's everything going? You have your appointment scheduled, just checking in as a, psychosocial support, making sure everything's all set. They have what they need at home, safe sleep plans, all the connections. And I said, okay, so what's the plan going forward? Have they mentioned, support for HIE? And the mom just looked at me like, what? I said, "Well, have you heard those words before?" "No." "What is it?" And I felt slightly like, "Oh gosh, I have to put my foot in my mouth." Like, okay, well, that's okay. Let me go talk to your healthcare team, and if they didn't say it, then okay, no problem." And had to kinda let it go. And it feels like a lost I mean, I certainly went to the nursing team and said, "I'm so sorry." I asked if they got the connection for this, and because it is part of the standard, and they just hadn't. And they were like, "Oh, yeah, we'll go follow up." So it was repaired, but the issue was it was not a word they'd heard about. It was, "We checked the boxes, we were cooled, it's fine, I'm fine, he's feeding, he's fine. Check, check, check. Now we're going home." Because, of course, it makes sense to me as a parent. You want everything to be fine, okay? It's fine, right? It's fine? It's fine, right? It's fine. Don't look, don't ask, it's fine. There's a lot of families who are like that because you just want to be fine. It's so scary. I just want to be fine. And in those cases where nobody's saying, "Hey, but let's just keep looking like this. Let's keep an eye out. Let's make sure the pediatrician knows this. Let's make sure that, you get followed in the NICU follow-up clinics with this history so that we can catch it as soon as we can because there are things, like you said, preventable, things that we can do to improve the long-term outcomes for this baby and for this family." It broke my heart that day, especially when it was preventable for this family not to be, to be surprised by it. Um, what do
Yeah, we don't
we
like surprises, and
Yeah.
I think we just owe it to all families to make sure that they have the same support as you would give another family. And what I hear sometimes from clinicians is this bias of like, well, we only give it to the more affected families that are, go home with G-tubes or trachs, and I'm like, but that's like 25% of the community. And HIE fundamentally changes your parenting journey. I don't care what the outcome is, you are impacted from HIE. You're impacted that things went haywire, and then you're concerned about your baby's brain. Like, they didn't stub their toe. Like, this is something that withholding that support, like, is not trauma-informed care. Like, choice and voice, right? If they choose not to engage in support because they feel they're great, that's wonderful. I feel like that's the biggest win. But when you withhold that from someone and you withhold that choice from them, that's paternalism, and that's not helpful because then we have families that will start processing everything that they've been through. And they're like, why didn't people tell me about this? Or like, these two families like you mentioned, the family that didn't receive support, like, and especially for her to find out that the hospital has the materials in her ch in I'm pretty confident that the situation was they did not think that her child was gonna have a more affected outcome because he's this chunky little cute baby that's, 8, 9 months old now, and doing very well, but you don't know either. Like, you don't know what's down the road, and so if she did not find resources, she doesn't know what questions to ask, what to think about, what to look for, what to push for, and be empowered as a parent, and that's what you want. I mean, like, these babies are going home to these parents. They need to be as psychologically healthy as possible, physically healthy, and empowered with information to help them parent their child the best. And just because HIE might not be a huge impact on this child in their trajectory, which by the way, you may also not know in the NICU because of follow-up, and we don't have great follow-up data yet on these babies, and more emerging data is coming up that these more mild babies are having school-aged impacts, that these families need to know so they can get the help they need because it takes a lot to qualify for special education services too. So if you don't have an understanding, it's just a domino effect, further down. So, I think one of the biggest gifts you can give to families is to give them the choice of support. That's an intervention. We know that it is an intervention that's been studied, that has evidence behind it. And so that's an evidence-based intervention that should be given to all families. And so if there is a specific diagnosis and there's support for that, let the family know. I don't care if it's HIE, if it's, some sort of cardiac something, whatever. Like, if there is a name for it, give them that. If it's a genetic disorder and there's not a organization for that yet, give them
The
the
global
organizations
organization.
that
Yep.
exactly, the global whatever. Like,
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
need that information to be their strongest parenting for that child.
Absolutely. It it makes me think too, in in the, the paradigm in the hospital, right? You have the neonatologist, you have the parents, and you mentioned, like, when they would do the rounds and, bringing you in, and we know for our preemie babies and our babies who have, even cardiac, let's say cardiac, because you just brought it to the conversation. They talk about, "Well, this is what we're looking at," and they have to give you sort of all of the bad news, right? Kind of legally, right? But including, these are the things we're looking at, right? That is empowering a parent to say, okay, this is what happened, and this is what we're watching for. Just like with feeding, we're watching to see if your baby can feed like this, and we can take the tube out and go like this. We're watching your baby's brain to see if this is what happened, and now we're watching it like this because he may, this experience means that we may have HIE or we have HIE, but how the outcome goes from here is different. That naming helps us to really understand um, where we're going, but it doesn't. And I understand certainly when we have a intraventricular hemorrhage or an IVH grade, right? So I kind of again for more of our babies who have prematurity and have these bleeds, then people think, well, what does that mean for the future? So I understand that it adds uncertainty, like, and possibly more questions to the healthcare team, and maybe that's why it's not being named so early or shared so early, because they don't know what the outcome looks like, but that there still is uncertainty for the parents. It's just even more because we don't even have the words to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, and I've dug into this with Ben and Daphna and others of talking about, like, I think a lot of we're all humans, right? And I think these physicians get into medicine to heal, and HIE is spooky, and they feel like a failure that they cannot fix, heal the brain, right? This is the best we've got. And it's really uncomfortable to have these conversations for everyone. It's uncomfortable and inevitably it goes back to, well, what happened? What led to this? And like the NICU's kind of the cleanup crew. They don't know what happened, like unless they were in the delivery room. And sometimes even then it's like there's just so many factors. So there's just a lot of uncomfortability with HIE, and that's the stigma that we have to continue to work through. And there's wonderful resources of communicating diagnosis and prognosis and all sorts of things that in a family-centered trauma-informed way. Family-centered care task force is doing an excellent job with that. There's researchers like Dr. Monica Lemon who's doing that. There's just wonderful, wonderful people and resources and tools available that I think everyone they're great QI projects for NICUs too, to work on like improving your communication, improving your support, improving your holding during cooling, all these things that sometimes HIE doesn't get like the ability to participate or have a focus on a QI initiative in the NICU. And this is really, there's plenty of opportunities for people to think about from a
Yeah.
QI lens too.
Yeah. Tell me about Max today.
Yeah, so Max is finishing up 8th grade in middle school and going to high school next year, which blows my mind.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kinda crazy, and he is living his best life every day, and that is the thing I've been saying about him for the past 14 years and what we want as parents. Does Max have impacts from HIE? Absolutely. Does he live his best life every day? Absolutely. He is, going to be in the pit and marching band next year,
Oh,
in the
cool.
percussion amp section, so not marching, but playing.
Mhm.
He takes bass guitar lessons, he is getting into golf, he swims, he has friends, they send each other ridiculous memes, like, whatever. Like, he is living his best life. We went on and had another child after Max, his 10-year-old sister. They love each other to pieces and then drive each other nuts as they should.
Great.
Yeah, like, there's been, a interesting journey, I think, as anyone where there's surprises along the way, both in, heartbreaking and wonderful ways as anything I think that's parenting in general too.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so he's doing really well, and, we're nervous but excited for him to take on this next chapter in high school.
sure. And how, a lot of families after a NICU experience, I would say a large majority, really wanna put their experience, they wanna give it a purpose, they wanna give it legs, right? We often slow our families down because they say this when they're getting closer to discharge, or it's sometimes on the first day. I wanna help. Um, so we sort of slow them down, make sure we go through the process and support them through that and bring them in when they're ready again. But it takes being an experienced survivor of the NICU and of the HIE experience, um, is a lot every day, and you live and work in it now. How do you care for yourself?
What a question. Like, Yeah,
So that's implying, do you care for
do
yourself,
you care for
Betsy
yourself?
Pilon?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, there's a lot of demands, the organization has grown leaps and bounds, and
Yes.
it's very busy, and, as you alluded to earlier, I've been very fortunate we have as an organization to have opportunities to collaborate in many different spaces, which has increased my travel, which I used to be terrified of flying, so it's really been a fun thing to see me conquer that
Wow.
lifelong fear,
Yes.
and travel to different destinations now, and advocate, for our community and be that conduit. But yeah, taking care of myself, I think, is like really being conscious of what that balance is and always trying to strike it. So the balance
Hmm.
of, diving into this work that is endless and rewarding and drives me crazy some days, and managing a family and a child with some medical complexity, and being, a good partner to my husband, and, and trying to balance. We talk about this in our family all the time, balancing our family time, our couple time, our individual time, the kids, all the things. I think everyone just tries to strive for balance. And that's what I try to do. So like summer's coming up. My plan is to we intentionally try to downshift, because the school year kind of circuit is very busy, with the organization. And I think a lot of physicians take time in the summer. So we can downshift as an organization and really prioritize that downshift. It doesn't help in the moment when you're like back to back to back. But also, I think just little things of not being afraid to like own your schedule too, and saying like this is too much, or like this is, being really aware, and then um not being afraid for, for tools. Like when I don't know, like went into taking this role on at the end of 2020. It was very stressful with family, COVID, all of the things. I had lost my mom 2 years prior, and I was like, I need like to work with a therapist for a bit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all of these life changes,
Yeah.
the world being crazy. And I think there's just a lot of support for mental health that we need to make sure we're taking care of, and preventative stuff too. I
Mhm.
think we're terrible as parents sometimes to prioritize that, but it's really important, the preventative maintenance of your body. Like you have to schedule it out and you have to make that time to do it. And so that's something that I think we've tried to prioritize, as a family and as a couple. And, we encourage our families and our staff and our volunteers as well to really try to find that balance, and that there will always be more work to do, but you can't do it if you aren't, trying to take care of yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we need you. So we need to take care of you because we need you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and parents find that, and I mean, especially like medical complexity, like they're drowning often,
Drowning.
and
Yeah.
like really. And, even after the NICU, like, the drowning that can
Yes.
happen, you have
Absolutely.
to prioritize, and you're not selfish for it. You deserve, like, everyone deserves to be their best for
Yes.
themselves, and for the ones that they love, and the people that they have in their lives.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's not selfish to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. Everyone is, especially mothers, and, very involved. All parents who are very
Mhm.
actively involved. Everybody's kind of the succubus. They're taking all of their life energy from you. So if we don't fill you, you have nothing. You can't fill from an empty cup. Um, I'm wondering, so we talk about for folks who go into the NICU, physical thing, what you couldn't live without when you were in the NICU. What would you put in your backpack always?
One of the things that I think became really special to us was a blanket that my cousin made for Max,
Hmm.
and it was like the softest blanket. And so it was not just comforting, like, oh, it's really sweet for the baby, but it was like a piece of comfort for us from someone that loves us, And
Hmm.
so that was, I mean, I think about that blanket as being like a key part of, the comfort that we had for the time in the NICU.
Wow, I love that. You brought her with you, or that's amazing. And If you had so folks who are listening out there, if there's a family who is in the NICU with, experiencing, first days, treatment, post-treatment, going home with HIE, any other words of wisdom you would have for a family
Yeah, I
there
think
now?
Hope for HIE and other organizations really try to fill that gap of, from discharge, like that people feel like it's a cliff. And, we have a exceptional social worker on our staff who worked in a NICU for several years. She gets it and she's helped discharge families. And so she's been able to really be key in having the credentials and the experience to build in a really amazing safety net that continues on as long as families need us, and families will come back and forth with their needs. But the biggest takeaway, I think, is just the importance of making sure that families get support for whatever they're going through, and that every family deserves that, and
Yeah,
don't take that away from them.
yeah, absolutely. If it's not available, if nobody's talking about it in your unit, wherever you are, you can find it on, hopeforhie.org.
Yeah,
It's there,
and we mean
right?
like so our support resources. You can just type in HIE.support. I tried to make it as
It's
easy as
beautiful.
possible.
Yeah, yeah. Don't think about it, just you need these 2
I need
things.
HIE support, HIE.support, type it in, it's there.
Perfect.
So,
I love it.
like,
I
easy
love it.
peasy.
And hope, it's something that we hold, as one of our principles, really. Obviously, you do as well. What does hope mean to you?
Mhm. Yeah, I think hope means something different in every season and every kind of experience. I think in this journey, a lot of times people start with hope in an outcome. And I think hope is so much broader and more beautiful than that because you can find hope in every outcome. You can find hope and joy in any journey. And the hope is that, we're all walking each other through this experience
Yeah,
of life and that things can and will be brighter through the ups and downs, and we're in it together.
that's beautiful and profound. Thank you so much, Betsy. I could talk to you all day, but I will let you go for now, and I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. And if you're out there listening to us now, maybe you're on your way in or out of the hospital, you're sitting by your baby's bedside, you're up in the middle of the night pumping or pacing and worrying, or maybe you've gone home even with your baby and you're still navigating the life after the NICU. Betsy and I want you to know that you're not alone, and we look forward to sitting with you again sometime soon. Take gentle care.